Hey, you know, nowadays you just can't buy a graphics card. It's like Nvidia,
generative AI,
AMD, they got you hung upside down. They're shaking you for every ounce of change that you got. That's why, I mean, most of the time I am recommending the RX 6600. So you can check all of my GPU buying guide videos that I've made. And this card has regularly gone for below $200, and it's a decent value for it. I have this card, I've tested it, it feels good when you play with it. I mean, it's a good 1080p graphics card, good budget option. But we've gotten some bad news lately. AMD, look what I can do now. Oh, I'm on this side now. AMD discontinues RX 6600 RDNA 2 series, including RX 6600, 6600 XT, and 6650 XT graphics cards. And I think this is kind of wild because ain't nobody talking about this. This one only has 11 comments on this article. I think that's nuts because AMD is discontinuing not only this, but their next budget options like the 66 XT, which was quite a bit faster than that card, and the 6650 XT. And that was a $220 graphics card that was almost as fast as their RX 7600, which is wild because AMD's best budget graphics card, the cheapest one they offer from their newest generation, is $240. This is a good price for it. Now, it will see if the other cards, since those other cards are getting discontinued, if this one will drop in price. Not 100% sure. It's just like these cards cost too much for a budget system, and we're looking at like a below $200. We want a good graphics card for that value. Disappointing to see that it's already starting, the stock is already starting to dry up in China. Now, obviously, we're in the freedom country over here, but seeing it's drying up in China probably means it doesn't have that much longer until, you know, we start getting issues here. Depending on where you live, this might start drying up faster. At the moment, there's still 6600s available, at least in the US here. And we don't know how much longer it's gonna last because basically AMD just isn't manufacturing the cards anymore. It is typical. I mean, you'd think AMD's older generation, like a 6800 or a 6800 XT, you would think that these cards, they're gonna have to run out of stock eventually. They can't live forever. By the way, this is an insane deal. A 6800 XT for $430. Scoop that up if you're interested in a card at that price. That's a really good deal. Yeah, these cards will eventually sell out. It's just there is no other option at this below $200 price point that is really good. I mean, some people would recommend the A750 from Intel, and this is a scam, by the way. It's not $140. This one does go below $200 pretty regularly. At the same time, though, I just can't fully recommend Intel still. I want them to at least make another generation of graphics cards and see how that goes before I'm recommending this to everybody. But this could be a good deal for you. But this is the only deal that's below $200, and that really freaking sucks. There were rumors that AMD was going to release an RX 7400 and RX 7300. It wasn't exciting at all. I mean, rumors were literally that this 7400 and 7300 would have less than 8 gigabytes and less than 6 gigabytes of VRAM. And that sucks. And that doesn't replace, like if this 7600 doesn't go below $200 or around $200, these cards aren't gonna replace it. They might end up being as fast as the 6600, but I don't wanna be buying a card that's looking like that. I'm just being honest, it doesn't look that good to me. And then on top of that, in terms of other budget graphics cards, Nvidia is discontinuing the RTX 3060. They aren't making these anymore. And this is the most popular GPU on Steam. Who knows if it's actually the most popular GPU in the world, but it's definitely up there. And Nvidia is now discontinuing this one, which basically means that they were making this for a while because it was a decent value with a 12 gigabyte VRAM capacity. And now from Nvidia, their best, cheapest option is probably a 4060, which isn't that great when it comes down to it. Or you can get the deal of a lifetime here, which is the RTX 3050 6 gigabyte. It's going for $170. I mean, what a deal. By the way, this thing is freaking terrible. Do not buy the 3050 6 gigabyte. It is a waste of money. So Nvidia is discontinuing their best budget or most popular graphics card out there. It starts to make me think this has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. This could be for nefarious purposes from Nvidia because they don't want to give us more than 12 gigabytes at a lower price because then you don't want to upgrade your graphics card because you have enough VRAM, all that kind of stuff. That's definitely a possibility. I'm not ruling that out. But there is also another theory that I have is that RAM prices are supposed to go up by 8 to 13% in Q3. And the reason that memory prices that they're saying are going up is because servers and stuff need a lot of RAM. and the server demands are really high right now for companies, so they're shoveling all the RAM there, and then that doesn't leave any RAM for us. Now, it doesn't exactly mean it's going to apply to VRAM for our graphics cards. This is specifically saying DRAM, but it is definitely possible. So Nvidia might be seeing that RAM prices are going up, and the 3060 has more VRAM in it, and maybe they're just scaling back, basically stop producing this card because it might be costing too much or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. It's definitely a possibility that's a combination of that, and some more evidence that might be because the RTX 4070 is going to start launching with GDDR6 memory. Now, usually the 4070 is, I'm going to swap it to the right side, GDDR6X memory, which means typically has, where the heck is it here? Has 500 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth because it's 192 2-bit bus and it's GDDR6X memory. It leads to this memory speed. But this really sucks from Nvidia because the 4070 could now have GDDR6 memory, which means we might end up seeing a graphics card more like the memory bandwidth of the 7700 XT from AMD. This is a GDDR6 memory graphics card, also 192-bit bus, and it ends up with a total memory bandwidth of about 432 gigabytes per second. A big cut. I mean, we're losing like 70 gigabytes per second because new 4070s are supposed to be launching with that. And that means basically the 4070 might perform worse at higher resolutions where you need more memory bandwidth, or in games that are more sensitive to memory bandwidth, we might see that the 4070 GDDR6 instead of 6X version might end up performing worse in those games. This all could be because memory prices are getting more expensive and Nvidia is going to cut that back. Now, we're not 100% sure like if performance is going to decrease with this 4070. Usually they make these refresh cards or whatever reason, whatever you want to call them, usually they make them perform exactly the same. I don't know how they're going to make GDDR6 memory can perform the same as GDDR6X memory, but apparently it usually ends up working out that that's the case. Definitely have to see on that. We can't be 100% sure of this whole situation. It sucks to see when VRAM prices, according to Tom's Hardware here, sorry, just last year, we saw that VRAM prices were only for 8 gigabytes was $27. And now we're saying that maybe VRAM prices are going up again, especially right when we need more VRAM on graphics cards. It's like we can't win with this, and if we want to, we're gonna have to pay even more, it seems like, for VRAM. And that might tie into some of the rumors that are saying that Nvidia graphics cards not going to be upping their VRAM with the next generation on 50 series, which would really suck, but I wouldn't put it past them, especially if prices are starting to go up now, at least according to this here. But on the flip side, I am pretty ready for GDDR7 memory. It's been a while. We've been on GDDR6 memory since like 2018. It'll be cool to see GDDR7 memory because it does have improved memory bandwidth from 768 gigabytes per second to 1024 gigabytes per second. So that's, I mean, that's almost like 50% bandwidth improvement. This just means that maybe don't need as wide of a memory bus to get similar memory speeds, or for the same bus width, we're gonna get just higher speed RAM, which is really cool. But something else that I'm excited about with GDDR7 in particular is because it can actually be available in 3 gigabyte and 4 gigabyte modules. 3 gigabyte is probably the big one, because what we might end up seeing is a card, say like we talked about the RTX 4070. This could still be on a 192-bit bus, but that means if you had technically 3 gigabyte DIMMs, that we could end up with an 18 gigabyte graphics card instead of a 12 gigabyte one. 18 sounds like a lot better than 12 gigabyte. It would probably have more memory bandwidth as well because this GDDR7 would be faster. But the only problem with GDDR7 is that it's going to cost more. Definitely going to cost more, especially at the beginning here. That's just all to be said though, that like we're seeing memory prices go up, which means they're going to have to cut down on VRAM. We're seeing graphics cards like the 6600, the 3060 getting discontinued, which was some of the best budget graphics cards at the moment from both Nvidia and AMD. Prices are probably still going to keep going up. And it wouldn't surprise me if manufacturing and fabrication at TSMC, where a lot of these companies are getting their chips manufactured, is just getting more and more expensive because everybody's relying on one foundry to do this stuff for the most part. And TSMC can just start charging more and more if they don't have significant competition. These budget cards don't seem like they're going to get any better. And these cancellations and seeing that AMD doesn't seem like they're releasing a 7400 or a 7300 really just makes me think, where are the budget cards going to come from? Are they just completely dead? Is budget less than $200 graphics cards just dead? Do you have to go to the used market for this now? The new market was always okay. And under $200 now is that even gonna be an option? Is the budget side of PC gaming, the graphics card, the most important component to play a game in your computer? Is that just like not a thing anymore? But in other news, this is the whole GPU news and whole PC hardware news video, by the way. I wanted to show you guys that Nvidia is making an RTX 30 series graphics card with an ADA level GPU. Technically a 40 series graphics card, but it's gonna be called a 3050. And if we see here, it's going to be using an 8106M processor or GPU die, which made me think is that an RTX 4060? But no, a 4060 actually uses 8107. So this is going to be a relatively similar chip, but it is a mobile processor though. But it could be similar to an 8106 die, which is the same die that's on the RTX 4060 Ti. But on this mobile SKU, it's going to be called an RTX 3050, which is actually really similar to something that Nvidia has done in the past, where they made an RTX 2050 laptop GPU, which was actually a 30 series GPU and a 20 series naming, which is really weird. I don't like how they're naming stuff, but this is just something to report on. Oh, hey, I definitely have memory. What are you goofing about? I have 64 gigs of RAM. What are you yapping about? Bro, we're only like half memory usage, but it's closing tabs on me, bro. In other news with graphics cards, if you were, you're gonna build a budget system and everything, have you ever tried not building a budget system and spending so much money that it's unfathomable? Because this is where all the VRAM is going. It looks like 48 gigabytes of VRAM on the 4090D in China. And they're doubling the memory on this card from 24 gigabytes to 48 gigabytes of VRAM. I wonder how much this thing is gonna cost in China, man. And this is a China-specific graphics card, the 4090D, and the 4080 Super is actually getting 32 gigabytes of memory here. It's very clear what Nvidia's goal is here with the 4090D, especially with them doubling the VRAM capacity, is they're clearly wanting these companies in China to farm AI and all that kind of stuff, which I find funny, specifically with the US government banned them from selling the 4090, the normal one, the 24 gigabyte one, in China 4, was because they didn't want China to be getting like ahead in AI and all that. But then here is Nvidia offering double the VRAM capacity, clearly to train AI models in China. Nvidia doing Nvidia things. Awesome. Another Nvidia news, by the way. This one's actually a pretty positive one. If you do have an Nvidia graphics card, you can take advantage of this. Have you ever tried the Nvidia app? Nvidia is slowly but surely moving away from GeForce Experience and the Nvidia control panel, which ain't nobody want to use this ancient dinosaur tech of control panel here. Like, they've been so far behind AMD with their interface for their drivers and everything. I'm so glad Nvidia is moving to like a dedicated app for this. This app's actually been out for a little while, but not all the features were there. Now, if I hop into this app here, I do have an Nvidia and GPU installed at the moment. Before, Nvidia didn't actually have a tab here for system. Before, it was just home, drivers, graphics, and now it's system. There's redeem, and then there's settings. But now you can do system. You see performance, all the stats for your system and your GPU and all that. You can check your displays and configure things inside of here. You used to have to do this in the control panel, and now you can do it in here, which is freaking great. And then here you can go to video tab, and then this uses AI to enhance certain things in video, say like RTX super resolution. This basically takes any video and hopes to eliminate some of the compression artifacts and maybe upscale it to a higher resolution. And then there's also RTX HDR, which I have tried, and it does look really good. I will say, like, this is a good technology. It looks good. I don't have really anything to complain about it. It's nice to have this feature, and now it's in a more concise, nice looking app as comparison to what Nvidia has been doing before. Here are all the drivers and all that stuff. All your installations here looks so much better. What's also nice about this app is you don't need to log into an account anymore. You can do it without it, whereas GeForce Experience, you had to log in with an account, which I found so annoying. The only reason you ever need to log into an account now is if you want to redeem things here. So yeah, you'll have to make an account for that. And in other news, we're actually finding out some things about AMD's next generation of GPUs. We've already heard things that it's basically just a refresh of their RDNA 3, their 7000 series graphics cards, but they're not going to be doing a high-end GPU, and that they're just going to mainly be bug fixing the issues that were with RDNA 3. There is a significant possible architectural change with this, and that is with ray tracing. And the reasons that we're seeing with this and some indicators because of the PS5 Pro, I think might be coming out this year. I'm not actually sure of that, if it's been announced or not. The specs of the PS5 Pro does say that is a custom chip with an RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 features. Whatever it is in this PS5 Pro could definitely be coming to AMD's next generation of graphics cards. And here is this saying I'm running out of RAM on my computer, but I definitely am not. I'm still only using half of the RAM on my computer. This makes no sense to me. But some of the features that the PS5 Pro is going to have: double ray tracing intersect engine. I'm just gonna read some of these things off so you guys can get a note of it. This may lead to increased GPU processing for rays in parallel, which would just improve performance. RT instance node transform could enable GPUs to handheld geometries more efficiently. 64-bit RT node could improve processing and require less memory. Ray tracing tri-pair optimization could reduce computation load required to calculate ray triangle intersections. Change flag encoded and by something like that. BVH footprint improvements, bounding volume hierarchy, potentially faster grouping of scene geometry, RT support for OBB and instance node intersection. This could refer to support for oriented bounding box, which may enable higher precision and efficiency by offering smaller bounding values. Basically, AMD with RDNA 4 looks like they're going to be improving their ray tracing a lot. We all know that AMD GPUs versus Nvidia GPUs, or even Intel GPUs, really hasn't been holding its own nearly as well with ray tracing. And that's because of how AMD integrated ray tracing into their architecture. It wasn't some kind of like really dedicated system. Basically what AMD did, and it makes sense at face value, is to basically use other parts of the GPU to do the ray tracing on it. I'm pretty sure they threw this on the texture mapping units and some of the shader units on the GPUs. Just kind of made this hogposh situation kind of work with RDNA 2 and RDNA 3 for ray tracing. But now it seems like they're actually making dedicated pieces of hardware on the GPUs to do ray tracing, do it more efficiently. So we could be seeing the huge bump in ray tracing from AMD, which should push the industry forward with ray tracing. The thing is, AMD makes the chips for the consoles and all that, and if these consoles don't have good ray tracing, then developers don't push ray tracing that much. We have to have the power in the consoles or in every GPU out there to even push ray tracing at all. Now, I'm not even 100% sure if I really even like ray tracing when it comes down to it. Ray tracing is a huge performance hit, sometimes can look amazing, and in games like Cyberpunk, sometimes doesn't really matter, and I don't really care about it. And most of the times I'm not turning ray tracing on when I'm playing unless I have an extremely powerful graphics card in my system for some reason. What is my dog doing? Yeah, but AMD seems to be improving it quite a bit. We do have another report here from Tech Power Up. Several AMD RDNA 4 architecture ray tracing hardware features leaked. We've known since May that AMD is giving its next generation RDNA 4 graphics architecture a significant upgrade with ray tracing performance, and have had some clues since then that the company is working on putting more of the ray tracing workflow through dedicated fixed function hardware, unburdening the shader engine further. It seems like AMD is taking the future of ray tracing more seriously than they have been, and we might see ray tracing like this actually get pushed further. The only problem though is this is on AMD's newest generation. It's basically like AMD is going to be starting from ground zero again with ray tracing, because they're completely like re-architecting it on their GPUs. They basically are losing their progress. I mean, they probably learned quite a bit of things, but they're losing their progress and they're going to lose their optimization for ray tracing. So it's going to take a while for ray tracing to even get good on AMD cards, and not everybody's going to be on RDNA 4 unless for some reason it's amazing, which RDNA 4 doesn't look like it's going to be absolutely amazing, but I don't know. I'm just reporting on what I'm seeing. And speaking of AMD, this doesn't have to do with graphics cards, but the Ryzen 9000 series CPUs, the 9900X, the 9700X, all of this stuff, all of these CPUs out here, a lot of the thumbnails, and if you've watched videos and kept up to date on this, a lot of people aren't that excited about these CPUs because when you look at the actual performance of them, the 9700X, what are you doing? You see, here's the 9700X versus the 7700X Ryzen 7 7700, which is actually probably a better comparison. So the 9700X is at 1201, whereas the 7700 is 1125 on Cinebench here. So just in raw performance, you can see that the 9700X is not really that much faster than a 7700. What a lot of people were saying, there's been drama with these CPUs, is that they're so much more efficient. The 9700X is only a 65 watt TDP. If you put on max PBO, it actually will draw a lot more power than that. But it's only a 65 watt TDP chip from AMD. And then the 7700X, the older gen CPU that they're comparing it to, was a 105 watt TDP. And that means that they're getting almost the same performance, but the 9700X is using a lot less power. Was it like 40% less power? But the thing is, the drama's come out about this because if you look at this graph here, this is the actual power consumption in Cinebench from Hardware Unboxed here. All the links are in the description to everything. The 9700X and the 7700 are drawing the exact same amount of power, 95 watts. Whereas the 9700X, when it's on PBO, which is the built-in overclocking, it is getting 163 watts, whereas the 7700X at its normal clock is at 138. 7700 wasn't that far behind the 9700X, and it's drawing the exact same power. So the rate here, a lot of people were saying with Ryzen Zen 5, and it's awesome, they're great because they get the same performance but at way less power. That's just barely the case. And we can see it here too. Gamers Nexus did an efficiency comparison between Zen 4 and Zen 5. And the 9700X and Cyberpunk here got really good efficiency when you limited the power even further than it already was. But if you're at the normal stock power, which ends up not being 65 watt TDP, it's like 80 watts or so, 2.2 frames per watt. But then if you look at the 7700, you're actually getting the exact same frames per watt. They're getting the same efficiency. And this applies to other things. The 9700X in Blender, ignore this top one, this is even more cut power. The 9700X is getting 19.2, I don't exactly know what this unit is, watt hours? It says watt hours, that's what this is. 7700 is getting 21.2. So they're really not that far apart, really not that far off in efficiency. It's not like this huge generational leap or anything. That's kind of disproving just right off the bat all of the claims that, oh, Zen 5 is more efficient. It's like, just because they slapped 65 watt on the chip compared to the older chips that were 105 or whatever, it doesn't actually mean the architecture is more efficient, because it has to proportionally give a lot more performance. And you know, you can't forget that you could always just drop the power on the older chips like Ryzen 7 7700 versus the 7700X, which is actually the 7700X is here at 32.7. If you just compare the 7700X to the 9700X, you're at 19.2 to 32.7. That's a huge lift, but you really should be comparing it to the other 65 watt chip from the Zen 4. That changes the story like hugely, so dramatically. I will say I did check out this new CPU, the Ryzen 9 9900X, because one of the most disappointing parts, like if your CPUs aren't going to be more efficient, can they at least give more performance? Actually, most people look for more performance on a new generation of processors than they really look for efficiency, unless the efficiency on the previous generation was terrible. But the 9900X is actually like a pretty good looking CPU. Is getting decent generational uplift like compared to the other ones, because we see here like the 9700X versus the 7700X was literally 13.2 versus 13.3, or if you go here, the 7700 was at 14.3. Whereas if you do look at the 9900X, which is a 12-core processor that just came out, versus a 7900X, we're actually going from 7.7 to 9.0. And then if we actually compare it against the last generation, you know, lower watt chip, this was this the 65 watt chip? I think it was, or is 105 watts? I'm not 100% sure. This was 10.6 minutes here versus 9900X at 7.7 minutes. So this is actually a pretty decent difference if you're on the 9900X, at least I think. I think AMD made some improvements with the dual CCDs so they communicate to each other properly. There's even been more controversy with the dual CCDs because we look at something like the 9950X. For some reason, AMD made you jump through tons of hoops with this processor and do the same thing that they did with the 7950X 3D, where you have to do a core parking and everything because one CCD is faster than the other CCD, or they don't want the CCD crossing and using one core when it really should be using another core, and all that kind of stuff. This generation of CPUs is just a freaking mess. AMD just went and ruined it more because Hardware Unboxed made a video, which is just absolutely wild. Hardware Unboxed actually was talking with AMD. AMD was like, how did you get those numbers? Like, they shouldn't be as bad as they are, or as disappointing as they are. Like, we got better numbers in our shop and stuff. What AMD asked Hardware Unboxed is if they were using an administrator account on Windows. They expect, or they were asking if the normal person would be using an administrator account on Windows. And what's interesting, it's like, this just feels like the biggest cope ever. It's like, we're using an administrator account? Because when you use an administrator account, and what Steve found actually is, if you use an administrator account, I'll hide my face cam, that the 9700X here was actually faster than the 9700X without the admin special account on Windows. And if we go here to like Last of Us, then we see that the 9700X was at 181 and the past one was at 170. So it is true that, yeah, there actually is a problem with Windows. If you're not running an administrator account, you can unlock more performance by using that specific account. The only problem though, AMD failed to mention that also if you're on their 7000 series chips, you also get the exact same like uplift most of the time from 175 to 182 on their older chip. So it doesn't really matter if you're on a Zen 5 chip because all Ryzen processors get a boost from Windows using the administrator account. Hey, I'm filming this part after I recorded the actual video. Some more news came out because AMD doubled down on the Windows thing, saying that reviewers weren't actually reviewing the processors properly, or that they should have been using an admin account when no one should be using an admin account on the Windows PC because it puts you at a huge security risk. And it feels like Omega Cope trying to say that their processors they're just misrepresented. It's just, they don't understand them. And they made it seem like only the Ryzen 9000 processors were affected by this quote-unquote Windows bug, but in reality, actually the 7000 series chips were also affected almost to the same degree. Not quite as heavily, but they make it seem like it was a non-issue for the older parts. This is pretty weird by AMD and just makes them, I think, look worse. So this thing got really messy. AMD saying this is just nuts to me. Now I will say, it seems like Windows is going to be rolling out an update that is going to improve Ryzen performance like relatively soon without having to go to an administrator account. So we should be, if you're on a Ryzen processor like I am here, you should be getting a performance improvement, at least in games, relatively soon. So we'll see how that goes. But the fact that AMD was even suggesting this to Hardware Unboxed just means that they're pretty desperate for Zen 5 to show anything like good. It's just disappointing. I think so many people were coping with the power consumption and everything and saying that it's so much better and all that. It's because we haven't seen a disappointing generation from Ryzen processors as of yet. All the way since 2017, we haven't seen a disappointing generation of Ryzen processors. So it almost felt like unknown, that this is impossible. And it's a lot like leaving people flabbergasted. AMD can still disappoint. Hopefully AMD doesn't start stagnating with their processors. And off the topic of AMD, we've been on them for a little while here, is Nvidia. And Nvidia, I just want to go over this pretty briefly because there isn't that much news on this at the moment, is going to be investigated over their abuse in the AI market, that they might be investigated for antitrust things, at least in the US. And it says here, at least according to videocards.com, the US Department of Justice is investigating complaints from competitors about Nvidia's behavior in the AI chip market, according to a report from The Information. The DOJ is reaching out to companies like AMD to gather information. Allegations suggest that Nvidia has threatened to penalize customers who buy products from competitors and might charge higher rates for networking gear if companies purchase AI chips from AMD or Intel. It's really anti-competitive and that kind of stuff. We're not 100% sure if this is going to actually turn into a trial and Nvidia will be put up for this. Videocards.com does say here that this isn't the first time that Nvidia has faced antitrust investigations. Back in September, similar complaints from French companies led to investigators raiding Nvidia offices. This isn't the first time this happened to Nvidia. We'll see if it actually comes through this time. The only thing though is I think a lot of Nvidia is like being anti-competitive. I'm not an Nvidia meat riding or anything here. A lot of it is really just because they're pretty much the only major player at the moment in the AI market that can produce quick results for companies to train their models on. So until there is actual competition and we can genuinely see how Nvidia is going to behave with that, I'm not sure if this is really going to go through. We might see this years down the road that Nvidia would be investigated further, at least in my opinion. I could be completely wrong. But this kind of segues into another antitrust thing that has been happening. Google has an illegal monopoly on search. The US court or judge finds the Department of Justice sued Google, and they found that Google is engaging in monopolistic behaviors. Is that Google has paid 26.3 gigabillions, in 2021 alone to ensure that its search engine is the default on smartphones and browsers and to keep its dominant market share. So basically, if you guys are aware of this, whenever you get a phone, a computer, or anything like that, Google is pretty much the default search engine. Like say you get a MacBook, you say you get an iPhone. Google is literally paying companies that sell those devices to put their search engine as the default one to start on your device. Google is shoving out the competition, introducing people to Google so they feel comfortable and they don't know any other option really. You have to get out of your way to find something like DuckDuckGo or Bing. Who's using Bing? Google really has had a complete market share dominance over the search area of tech, and it does not surprise me that this is happening. The rivals of Google, since this trial, the Department of Justice won, basically what do the rivals of Google want? Is DuckDuckGo proposes that the court bar Google from buying default status or pre-installation, which could scuttle its multi-billion-dollar deal with Apple, and provide access to its search and ad APIs. So basically what DuckDuckGo was saying is that they can't pay companies to be the default search engine on the device. That the company itself that they would have been paying needs to make that decision for themselves, basically, which they might still choose to use Google. So I'm not 100% sure there. They also said that other companies would be able to access its search and use the ad APIs that Google uses. Obviously, in the ad market, Google's in the information business, guys. Like they sell ads to people and they're extremely powerful with this. I think this here is probably a Google ad. I'm actually not 100% sure that is this Google. Yeah, it's a Google ad. Google is freaking everywhere with ads. One other thing I saw here is that from The Guardian, Google might not be getting a slap on the wrist for this behavior. So a lot of people thought that they would be. Possibly divesting the Android operating system was one of the remedies most frequently discussed by the Justice Department's attorneys. So possibly Android might become its own business. It's kind of like how back in the day, like with like the big oil companies and everything, or was it Big Radio or something? I don't know. There's like other monopolies that were split up into different companies that are really still companies that we use and see today. Possibly Android might become its own thing. I'm guessing it would still have a working relationship with Google, but could be its own company. Officials were also considering trying to force possible sales of AdWords, Google's search and ad program, and a possible divestment of its Chrome web browser, according to the reports. So possibly Chrome could become its own business too. A Justice Department spokesperson said it was evaluating the court's decision and would assess the appropriate next steps consistent with the court's direction and applicable legal framework for antitrust remedies. So they're definitely still looking into this. This is a huge deal. Splitting up Google is insane. Like Google might really become a bunch of smaller companies when it comes down to it. The spokesperson said that no decisions had yet been made. A Google spokesperson declined to comment. Google is planning to appeal the ruling, so we could see another court case here from Google, and it faces another antitrust suit by US Justice Department set to go on trial next month. Google is in some hot freaking water, and this is like nothing new from what the Justice Department has been doing. They've been investigating these big tech companies for a little while here. It reminds me of a situation, hey, like with Activision and Blizzard, and this is what maybe Google could have avoided. Microsoft was going through the acquisition of Activision and Blizzard and King. You know, we all love Candy Crush. Microsoft did this. They got investigated for monopolistic behavior because they were buying so many game companies for Xbox and all that. Microsoft had to make all kinds of deals and settlements with the court case to make sure that they aren't going to engage in this. Like, I'm pretty sure they promised for 7 years or so that they're going to make all their releases multi-platform. We see things like this. Xbox games are reportedly going multi-platform. A lot of games are from Xbox. I don't really know what games Xbox is making that is that exciting. Xbox is Xbox right now. Nowadays, they have to act like they're the good guys and release all of their games on other platforms because, hey, we just love gamers. But really, Microsoft doesn't really want to be investigated for monopolistic or antitrust behaviors. We could definitely see with Google and all of this stuff happening, they might not get away with it nearly as much. We'll see how the appeal goes and if they can make a case for themselves. I'm hoping it's not a slap on the wrist. I mean, I personally kind of like Google products like quite a bit. They also own YouTube, which is kind of wild too. Could YouTube become its own company? I mean, I think it probably could. I don't think they necessarily need Google other than the ad space part. The last thing I want to cover here, I'm going to swap my camera to the left side. It's just a little bit of a smaller information here. If you guys do know that Nvidia actually tried to acquire ARM, like the chip maker and the microarchitecture developer and all that stuff. Nvidia tried to acquire them and they actually got investigated for antitrust stuff and were denied the acquisition of ARM, which is probably a good thing. What we're seeing though is kind of wild, and this is probably way far out. We've seen how much Intel has struggled to make new GPUs and everything. ARM is rumored to be developing a gaming graphics card competing with Nvidia. So we could possibly see a fourth player in the graphics card game. ARM, just like Intel, has actually had quite a bit of experience working with graphics. I mean, they've had integrated graphics on phones. Well, I guess that's more like Snapdragon and stuff, but they have at least experience. I don't know what specific chips ARM has made themselves, other than like working through and licensing deals and everything. ARM could be making graphics cards, but I'm just saying Intel has struggled significantly, though their cards are getting pretty decent now, and I'm ready to see how Battlemage, their next generation of graphics cards, goes, their second generation. The quote that we're getting here is UK chip giant ARM is developing a graphics processing unit in Israel that will compete with Nvidia and Intel, not AMD, even though AMD is definitely the other gaming graphics card. Okay, but sources familiar with the matter have told Globes ARM is estimated to be employing about 100 chip and software development engineers in its global graphics processing group at its development center in Rayana. At this stage, ARM is reportedly engaged in graphic processing for the video game market, and at the same time, as was the case with Nvidia, the technology could also be used for AI processing. So they're gaming cards. Gamers love AI. I'm interested in this because obviously ARM chips are very much known for their power efficiency and stuff. I don't think this would really apply to graphics cards. I mean, it's not like they're based on x86 like a CPU is. Maybe they could be more efficient, but I kind of doubt that'll go. I don't know how this will pan out in total. Imagine plugging an ARM graphics card into your system. I don't know how that would go, if I'm being honest. We'll see how it goes. I just wanted to at least plant this worm into your guys' head that ARM could be jumping into the GPU market. Yeah, some crazy freaking stuff. Obviously, budget graphics cards. Maybe ARM will make a budget graphics card, but budget graphics cards just feel like they're declining more and more. They're getting less and less value oriented. The best value cards out there aren't going to exist. So unless the next cards up in the stack come down in price to match that, we're not really gonna have a good value $200 graphics card. Nvidia canceled their 3060, AMD's canceling their 6600, or they're finally done making them. Those are last generation cards, which is so weird because the last generation cards were the budget cards. We'll see, maybe the current generation now will become the budget cards again. AMD's Ryzen 9000 series CPUs are just really disappointing. Antitrust things with possibly with Nvidia, and the whole Google situation is nuts. So a lot to talk about. Good to make a news video. I haven't actually made one in quite a while. Just thought this was a lot of news that needed to be spoken on. So hopefully you guys have a good one and this informed you. And I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Peace.